morning, Mick. Happy Monday. I will wait to see if anyone else is going to jump into chat really quick, but I will give the introduction. Good morning and welcome to Board Gaming Breakfast. Board Gaming Breakfast is a live stream series that I do Monday through Friday, where we'll go live for 30 minutes and talk about a few different things. The first thing we'll like to start off the breakfast with is we bring a game of the day to the meal. This is where we'll give an overview of it won't be a full playthrough, but we'll give an overview of the game that we're talking about. We'll talk about some of the mechanics that are causing it to be on our mind and reasons why we've enjoyed the game or parts that we found interesting. We'll then go into our spin the wheel exercise where we add a new mechanic to the game that we've just talked about. And so it'll be randomly generated, and we have a 5-minute brainstorm of how we might be able to add that mechanic into the game of the breakfast. And then we'll finish off the breakfast with a 5-minute design brainstorm challenge where we'll get a prompt for a game that will consist of 4 different criteria that we have to fit into the game, and we'll have 5 minutes to see how far we get with that prompt. So with that quick overview out of the way, let's jump right into what the game of the breakfast is. So I gave a little sneak peek before, but today we're going to be talking about Red Cathedral. Red Cathedral is the main mechanics in it are a dice selection resource management game, I guess would be the best way to classify it. And so I'll give a quick overview of some of the parts and pieces because those are going to be the ones I'm talking about today. But you have this main board that we'll be referencing, and then everyone else has their own little player boards. So as you can see, it's a big wheel that you'll be moving dice around clockwise, and you'll have your little player board as well. And so how the game works is that everyone is taking contracted assignments of the Red Cathedral that we're trying to rebuild. It's a competitive game, and you're trying to build your parts that you've been assigned to the castle most efficiently to get the most prestige points at the end of the game. So some of the things I want to talk about quickly are these player boards, and they're double-sided for a more advanced variant. But the player board, I played it for the first time over the weekend, and there's a few parts that I really like from what's going on here. So we have these 6 sections, and each of them are tied to a different die that we'll talk about, and we'll talk about the resource management track as well. So the game is seeded at the start of the game, so you'll have these circle tiles on different sections of the board, as well as you'll have these workshop upgrade tiles that will be on the different parts of the cathedral. So as you're claiming different parts of the cathedral that you want to build, you'll be able to collect the workshop bonus that is on top of that card, and then you'll have the option to pay the cost to put it into one of these 6 spots in your workshop. And so one of the cool parts about that is that in the 3rd section of the game, when you will move a die and claim the resources that it lands on, you also can build this little engine of claiming bonuses that are associated to that die. So in this example, we put it in the blue section. So anytime we move the blue die, we'll also get the little bonus that we paid for up there. So I think that's a cool, clever way to give their 2 parts of the dice selection process that you have to think about. You can think about what bonuses that you have as the game goes, and you also can think about where the die will move to. Because how the dice movement system works is that you can see on the outside of these spaces, those are where the dice will live, and whatever the top value of the die is how many sections it will move in a clockwise manner, or I guess and so then whatever section it lands on, we'll pick a different resource. Say if we took the blue action and we landed here, we would get the pip value 4 of the purple resource. So we get 4 purple resources for that blue movement. And if we had that rock symbol in our blue section, we'd also get that material as well. And so I think that's a fun way to manage getting unique resources every time you move a die. And I think the fact that you don't start out with any of those bonuses and you build towards which engines you want allows players to jump right into the game without being overwhelmed of thinking, oh, I get a bonus associated to each different die, and you slowly get to build into that engine, which I think is a way to get a quick start out of the game, but feel like that you're building your own engine in the game, which I find to be really cool. The last section I'd like to talk about is this track down here. If you look and see, there's 4 flags that start out covering it out. They have your little flag pieces are what you're going to be using to claim the different sections of the Red Cathedral that you're going to be building. And when you start claiming sections, you'll eventually be taking those flags off of your resource track, and so it'll free up more resources that you can hold throughout the game. So I thought those were 2 clever ways to tie in multiple purposes for different parts of the game. And so those are the 2 mechanics that I would like to highlight today that I found very enjoyable in my first play of Red Cathedral. So the second part of the breakfast is we will pull up our wheel spinner and spin the wheel, and we switch screens. And so hot potato. So the mechanic that we're trying to put into today's game is hot potato. Potato's precious. All right, so we got hot potato as the mechanic that we're trying to add into Red Cathedral today. And so hot potato, for those of you who are not familiar, is found in games like Old Maid or the kids game Hot Potato, where you don't want to be the last one to hold on to some sort of item. And so there's a negative association attached to it. And so I will start the timer. For those of you who are new, we set a 5-minute timer so that we have to force our ideas out quickly. Doesn't matter if they're good or not. But I've always found that the time crunch allows creativity to be forced out to be built on. So we will start the timer. And we will try and add hot potato into Red Cathedral. And so I would probably take one of the dice, and my first thought is I would add in, so let's quickly redraw the board. So you have your circle that has all the different sections that the dice go into. I think there's 8 sections. But there's 8 sections that can hold up to 3 sections of dice. And so say we had 1 die here, that was the blue die, and we have the hot potato die, and we have the red die here, and the yellow die here. I would try to add in the hot potato mechanic to there would be a die set out on the board that you don't want to land in. And if you do land in it, you would get some negative bonus points. So maybe you would lose a prestige for landing in the space that the hot potato is in. That would be so this is the victory points around here. And so you would lose a prestige every time you landed in the hot potato, and at the end of each round, after everyone's taken a turn, the hot potato die would be rolled, or it would move, and you would roll it, and that would be the new locate. You would roll the die to see how many spaces it moves around the board, and that's how the hot potato would travel around the board, so it's not just fixed in one area, because if you didn't have a movement mechanic on it, say it ended up in this money section, you would never be able to get money. We got a comment in the chat saying from Michaela. Michaela says maybe some guy who walks around the board. Are you trying to add theme to the mechanic? If you could give more information on what you mean by that comment, that'd be helpful. While we wait for Michaela, let us recap kind of what this hot potato, tomato. So we have the hot potato, that would be an extra die that would start in the game where you would roll it to determine what quadrant it sits in. And so right now our hot potato's here. And so for any player that, we could even make it like passing through it. So any die moved that passes through this section would lose a victory point or prestige point. And then at the end of each round, you would roll the hot potato die, and that would move clockwise around the board as well. So it put this quick little limiting factor on how you're selecting and moving around the dice. That one felt a little easy for brainstorming. Kind of fit right into the overall mechanics of the game. So I'm going to stop the timer there. We'll do a cleaned up version of that recap, and then we will finish off on how we would test this mechanic out. Excuse me. For the future. Michaela says, no, I'm just comparing to the guy at Targi that walks around the board. Doesn't he sort of prevent players from going somewhere? So a little different, but thought it seemed good. Yeah, that's very true. So Targi, for anyone who hasn't played, has the thief that moves around the board. And so quickly do a representation of what Targi looks like from memory. And so I believe it has 5 action cards. La 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 la. Doing some quick square sketching. Not perfect, but it's okay. So you have the outside board that is, I believe, randomly generated. It's been a while since we played Targi. And then there is 9 cards in the middle of it. So you have this 5x5 grid. And the outside of the grid, we'll color in these ones. The outside of the grid is where you'll be placing your workers for the round, but there is this thief worker that will block off a space, and that also is the timer of the game. And so what Michaela is relating it to is that this is sort of a blocker, and so you can't place in that space. I believe you still might have this space open. And so how the worker placement system works is that you'll end up with 2 cards in the game because player 1 has 3 tokens that they'll place out, and player 2 has 3 tokens that they'll place out. And so what'll happen is you'll connect the dots of where they land. So player 2 would end up with this card and this card for the round, where player 1 would get this card and this card for the round. And so it's working as a blocker, so we'd have to tweak it a little bit to make it a hot potato mechanic. So potentially so to recap, because our design doesn't really have a hot potato mechanic, potentially when you pass through this, you own the hot potato. And so there'd be some form of token that you'd get that every maybe round or at the end of the game, it would be negative points. So the hot potato die or your own colored die, so if we were blue, our goal would be to have that pass through the opponent's die, so maybe yellow, and that would transfer the token. So a recap, we have our hot potato that moves throughout the game, and it is negative points when you pass through it. And if you pass through it, you get the hot potato token, which is maybe worth -2 prestige at the end of the game. And so you're playing this game of back and forth, trying to pass off this hot potato token while not trying to get touched by the hot potato die or the current owner's die. would be the way that we build in the hot potato mechanic. And how we would test that is I would need to create a hot potato token. Sorry. Sorry about that. So we need to create the hot potato token, HT token. We would need the hot potato die that we would need added to the game. And I would need the hot potato. Those should all be peas. I don't know why I got tomato stuck in my head. And we'd need the instructions. And these probably I would just take from another game. And the instructions, I would do the same sort of thing. I would write the downside of having the token, and I would write sort of the rule construct around the hot potato die. And then the next time we jumped into a game of Red Cathedral, I would ask those playing if they wanted to, I would explain what the hot potato variant is and see if that's something that they want to include in our play of Red Cathedral for the next play, and that's how I would get it to the table quickly to test out. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, how you think this hot potato mechanic would work. If you're not catching the stream live, feel free to post them in the comments below, and we can further this idea together. And so with that, we'll move on to our last segment of the day, which will be designing a game without a reference game in 5 minutes or less. So we're going to letsmakeagame.net, and they have a game idea generator which is generally for video games, is what we've experienced are a lot of the prompts for this game. But we'll get a genre, a rule, a setting, and a theme for us to try to design around for a tabletop game in 5 minutes. So we'll generate the idea. So we got procedurally generated as the genre. Death is a new beginning is the rule. Setting is steampunk, and the theme is survival. And so we will reset our timer and see how far we get with this idea. Let's jump back in. Boom, we are on the clock. So we got procedurally generated, death is the new beginning, steampunk, and survival. Procedurally generated, how would we... Death is the new beginning. We had that, and we went with a phoenix for the thing to build around. Creation of data by computers is procedurally generated. If anyone like me is unfamiliar with exactly what that means. So I'm guessing that there would be some form of... I'm going to build off of the idea around Genius Square. So those who haven't played that before, at the beginning of the round, you have all of these lettered dice that you'll roll, and it'll create 6 blocked spaces, and the goal of the game is to fit your polyominoes into that space in a like fastest to do it wins. But that I would do something like that where there's a grid and we would roll. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's make some d8s. I like d8s. And there would be some sort of pathing that these get blocked out. So we rolled all the 4 dice, and that's what's generated for the procedurally generated map, is how we get the playing surface. So now we just got to figure out what we're doing here. Death is the new beginning. Feels like a zombie-side game. Interesting. So we gotta survive, so potentially we could do some form of solo campaign style game, and you want to see how many rounds that you get through of this procedurally generated map. And we could, death is the new beginning is the rule. That's, so how do we make it so that you die each level? Steampunk. So potentially we have, maybe we have a deck of cards that each have a movement associated to them. So we have, I know we've done this in a past live stream, but we'll take the same deck as Onitama for now, and we'll generate a bunch of different movements that we can go to, and death is the new beginning. So we'll start with the idea that you're drawing two, you're using one for its death effect, and one for its movement effect, and the death effect is an action to manipulate the deck, and the movement effect is how you move around the board. And the theme is that every round you have to be an. It's hard to describe out loud, but it'd be some sort of like video game aesthetic where instead of trying to save the lives, like you have to die each movement as a way, like maybe you have to like in the steampunk setting, you have some sort of contraption that you're living on, and it needs like an auto reset to keep your life in consciousness alive, where it's like a powered off, powered back on type setting. And so you draw two cards each round, and you'll choose the movement of one and the action effect for the other. And your goal is that you have maybe 6 turns to try and capture all of the objectives to get to the next level. And so it would be a solo-only style game where you're playing through. It could be one of those. Maybe we'll design around the button shy mechanic, so you can only have 18 cards, and we would say that 4 of them are the backs, or no, those that could just be the card back is the grid, and so you would have oh. All right, well, the timer runs out. So let's recap where we got to and see how clean we can get this to end up. So we're designing around the wallet style games or the tin games that you only have. How do we generate them? So we would need some sort of generating for the movements. And so maybe each card has, all right, so we have 4 cards. So there's no dice movement, but in the game, each one would have a location on it. So maybe something like this. And so each card has a randomly designated platform that you need to get to. And so at the beginning of each round, you would Michaela's in chat saying a button shy. That would be cute. So yeah, we're pitching a game to button shy real quick. So you have 18 cards, and on each card you have the backside is a grid of 2x4 with a random spot designated that you want to get to. And the first card is where you start, and this is where you want to finish. And so that would leave us with 14 cards that are left in the deck. And so you would, on each round, you draw 2 and choose one to use for its death effect to keep your self-charged, and the other is the movement effect. And so the death effect would have a manipulation tactic on it. The movement effect would be similar to the 2 shown here, where you have 7 turns to try and get from point A to point B, and those would be designated from the card you put first and the card you put last. And it would be a quick solo 5-minute game or less, where you're drawing 2 cards per round, choosing one to use for movement and then one to use for its manipulation ability, and that's sort of where we're at. So it'd have a steampunk theme to it, so we put the steampunk art pasted on as the graphics, and the goal is to see how many rounds you can get through to go from point A to point B before it fails, and death being the new beginning would be written into the lore of that sort of keep your heart alive by having to do a death ability each round. And so we've achieved all 4 of the prompts. So how we would test this is I would get 18 uh, playing cards, and I would probably tape over them, and I would come up with 18 different movement styles and 18 ways to manipulate the deck, and then we would have then I would create these cards here on the backside and see if that mechanic is fun. So I would probably do I'd probably create 9 cards and just double them to see how that feels for the first playthrough of it, because you have 8 different sections, so one could be in each different section, and then we would give that a go. And because it's a solo game, I can play by myself, so I'd give myself maybe 30 minutes to come up with the movements and deck manipulation actions that I would play, and I would probably simple enough to bring right into Tabletop Simulator, where I would just then shuffle the deck and test it out to see if that works. So that is our game called PDSS, based on PGDIANBSS. Nope, that's our procedurally generated game. So feel free to let me know in the comments below if this is something that, as a solo player, you'd like to play, or if you have ideas of how we could build off this. Maybe this is something that I will release the tabletop mod for it if there's enough people curious about wanting to play, and we'll go from there. So with that, that's today's Board Gaming Breakfast. I appreciate everyone that was participating in chat today, and I appreciate anyone that joins the conversation after this live stream is done. To recap, we talked about Red Cathedral was our game of the day, and we highlighted the dice building engine on the player board, as well as the resource management on the bottom were the 2 mechanics that we really enjoyed in our first play of this. Then we took Red Cathedral and added a hot potato mechanic to it, where we, with minimal components, could be able to test that out in no time. And then we finished with a solo survival style game, which might actually get a TTS mod off of it, because that seems like a fun design challenge to execute. So I appreciate everyone that has stopped by, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.